Is hip-hop dying? Yes, it is. And wait, I just want to put this as a disclaimer, but I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm not an African American, and I'm making this video about how an African American culture is declining in the mainstream. So I just want you guys to understand that I'm somebody who's loved and respected hip-hop since I was a child. I'm definitely not somebody who's been praying for the downfall of hip-hop, but if we're being objectively honest, mainstream hip-hop's numbers are not doing good, and they haven't been doing good for a while. If you compare 2024 to 2016, back then it was almost a regular to have a hip-hop album or a hip-hop song doing #1 on Billboard. Throughout the entire year, you would always find at least one song in the top 10. But fast forward to 2024, things aren't that way anymore. That's why a song like Not Like Us is such a big deal. This is the first time in a very long time that the biggest song in the world is a hip-hop song. Again, back then it was almost every other month, but now it's a very rare occasion. So how did we end up here? Well, now we're in a situation where the art is dying in hip-hop. And this is mainly because of two reasons. The labels are in charge and they're putting out TikTok songs. But the big question is, how did we end up here? Well, let's start with the labels first. The internet changed the world, and in this conversation, the internet changed the way we consume music. Back in the day, the people that pretty much dictated what your favorite genre of music was the radio stations and the music channels. Other than buying CDs, those were pretty much your only source of music. Whatever they played was whatever you listened to. And if you were listening to a radio station that happened to play a lot of hip hop, then you probably end up being a hip hop fan. The same goes for country music, the same goes for any other genre. But most radio stations were focused on playing songs from the biggest genres in the world, and hip hop was one of them. So naturally, a lot of people became hip hop listeners. But now when you look at the world today, things are completely different. Because things like Spotify and Apple Music have become more commonly used, now you're in control of whatever music you listen to. And on top of that, because we're listening to music via the internet, you have cultures and music from all over the world to listen to. Everything is at your fingertips as soon as you open Spotify. And the result of that is that people are listening to a bigger spectrum of music. This is why genres like Latin music have completely blown up, and Bad Baby's pulling in numbers that even your Drakes and Eminems can't do anymore. Genres like hip-hop have teenage girls singing songs in languages they don't even speak. Back in the day, those teenage girls would have been listening to Mindless Behavior or Pussycat Dolls. Today, those teenage girls are obsessed with Blackpink and BTS. And the point I'm trying to make is that because those teenage girls are now listening to Blackpink and BTS, that has now taken potential listeners away from hip-hop. It's not a coincidence that genres like Latin music and Afro beats and K-pop are blowing up in this time, and this happens to be also the same time that mainstream hip-hop is on the decline. And of course, this doesn't mean that nobody's listening to hip-hop. Hip-hop is still very much one of the biggest genres in the world. But the fact that these other genres are garnering more and more listeners means that now those people back in the day that were listening to hip-hop 100% of the time, today now they're only listening to hip-hop 50, 60 or 70% of the time. And this can be an either good or bad thing depending on how you look at it. On one hand, it gives other artists in other parts of the world an opportunity to become global phenomenons and be known around the whole world. And on top of that, if we're looking at black people specifically, this is the first time in history we're seeing black musicians from Africa and the UK and the Caribbean becoming mainstream artists in large numbers. The internet has given them that access, which is a good thing, but it does mean a little bit less sales for mainstream hip-hop artists. And now let's look at industry plants. Labels are now in control of the music that artists create more than ever. Well, it's actually quite simple. You see, back in the day, artists really had to grind for their success. In order to be seen by the public, it wasn't as simple as just uploading a video of yourself on the internet, because the internet wasn't that common. People had to physically go and perform at whatever stage they could get themselves on, whether it was some shop or some festival that was gracious enough to let you perform. And in order to even get on those stages, people had to know that you were a good artist. So, artists had to really sit down, work on their penmanship, their singing, their rapping, their cadence, become the best artists they could possibly be. This was the era where rappers were selling mixtapes from the trunks of their cars. In order to get a shot at success, the hustle was real. And that hustle paid off in the end because eventually they'd make a name for themselves in their neighborhood, thus establishing a core fan base. And now because they have a core fan base, they have leverage when a label does approach them to sign them. And leverage is extremely important when negotiating with a label, because usually when a label offers you a contract, the first contract they actually offer you has the label's best interest at heart. It's never the best contract an artist should sign, but an artist can negotiate for better conditions if they have leverage. If you can go to a label and show them that I sold this much, I sold 100K first week, then the label knows that you are of value. And if you are of value, other labels probably also want to sign you. So they need to make their contract more attractive in order for you to sign. Otherwise, another label will take them. Look at somebody like 21 Savage as an example. A lot of other rappers in his generation ended up in slave deals because they didn't understand the power of leverage. But 21 Savage is somebody who actually did. He's spoken about turning down contracts when he was on the come up and deliberately choosing to put out his first album before signing. And that worked in his best interest because his first album sold 77K first week and it had bank account on it, which was a viral hit. And because he had this leverage, he could sign a good contract that let him keep his masters. But most coming up artists don't understand this. So today, now that we're in an era where you don't have to hustle hustle as much as you had to back in the day. You can just post a song, it goes viral on TikTok, and then labels want to sign you. Usually these artists will actually sign the first contract they get offered, and because of that, the label takes full control over pretty much every aspect of that artist's life, including the music they make. And the problem with this is that labels are businesses, and businesses don't really think with the mindset of artistic intuition. They think with statistics and replications. And this is why nowadays it feels like most mainstream artists are putting out these cute little 2-minute songs, putting them on 20-song albums, and releasing them to the public in the hopes that one of them will become a TikTok viral trend. This is happening because the labels are in charge. And if an artist refuses to make the songs that a label wants them to make, usually labels will retaliate by not letting them release any music. The label will let you make whatever song you want, but you won't be able to release it. And we know this is true because how many artists have complained about their labels not wanting to let them release music. This whole trend has taken the art out of mainstream hip-hop. It feels like now we're living in a time where very few mainstream artists are actually putting out real art that feels like a reflection and extension of who they are. I mean, if you look at what hip-hop was back in the day, it was anti-establishment. Hip-hop was basically a form of retaliation from African Americans against their government. Songs like Ice Cube's F the Police, that was a protest. It was somebody saying something controversial about a controversial topic through the genre of hip-hop. But fast forward to today, I doubt a label would let a mainstream artist release a song like that. It's too controversial. They'd be afraid that you might offend a certain demographic, and that would make you too much of a risk to the label. And from the label's point of view, I guess I can kind of get why they're working like this, but at the end of the day, it's working towards hip-hop's detriment because it's taken the art out of art. And when hip-hop has less art in it, it's just less interesting. Hence, people are listening to other genres now. Now, my third and final point is that hip-hop is not dying. And I know I sound like I'm contradicting myself, but please just give me a second. I promise I am making sense. Notice how throughout this video, I've been specifically saying mainstream hip-hop. I've rarely ever said just hip-hop alone. And that's because mainstream hip-hop might be on the decline, but hip-hop as a culture will never die. You have to remember that when I'm talking about mainstream hip-hop, I'm talking about the top 1% of hip-hop. The Eminems, the Drakes, the YBN Cordays, the Jack Harlows. But again, that only makes up 1%. The rest of hip-hop makes up a vast majority of hip-hop. And when mainstream hip-hop declines, that doesn't really have too much of an effect on the rest of the community. And the reason why mainstream hip-hop's decline might be a good thing is because it might actually let hip-hop have a return to form. If labels keep noticing that mainstream hip-hop isn't selling as well as it used to be, most probably they'll start to focus on other genres to control. And if this does happen, more artists will be able to make music without label interference. And I see this to be true because if you look at smaller artists that still are pretty big, but not necessarily mainstream hip-hop, I'm talking about your Griseldas, your Earl Sweatshirts, these are artists that seem to still embody what true hip-hop is. They make music that still expresses who they are, and they're not afraid to step on someone's toes when they feel like it. And this is because the style of hip-hop they make isn't really what labels are going to push on the mainstream level, because they know a Griselda song is never going to be a TikTok trend. And because of that, labels will choose to focus more on the Coilo Rays of the world that make that mainstream type of music, and they'll control them and neglect the Griseldas and Earl Sweatshirts. And because of that, they're able to create real art. People often complain that female rappers only rap about sex, and to a degree it is kind of true, but that's only true if you're looking at mainstream female rappers. Labels are obsessed with trying to replicate the success of Nicki Minaj, and because of that, most mainstream female rappers have a specific look and a specific over-sexualized nature about them. They have a specific body type, they kind of have the same hair, they all kind of do the same thing. But when you look at female rappers that aren't in the mainstream, when you look at your Rhapsodies and your No Names, they're female rappers and they make the type of music that you feel like they're actually saying something. They're making art that you would compare with the likes of your Kendrick Lamars and J. Cole. And yes, every now and then they will rap about sex, but sex is something to talk about every now and then, but that's not the main thing they talk about. The topics they discuss are never ending. This is what happens when female rappers are allowed to create art without label interference. They make what I would personally call real hip-hop. And this is why mainstream hip-hop dying might be a good thing. As stated earlier, not only does it allow more black artists from different parts of the world to get a chance at mainstream success through showcasing the different genres and different cultures to the world, but on top of that, I can slowly feel hip-hop becoming what it used to be. Different voices sharing unique and controversial stories in different styles through the form of well-written rhythm poetry, otherwise known as rap music. But what do you think? Am I over-exaggerating and overthinking the situation? Is mainstream hip-hop not dying, just going through a rough period? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and please hit the like button because with 1,000 followers, I'm an extremely small YouTuber, so every single like counts. And thanks for watching.